Good afternoon, evening to you if you're watching this later in the day here on Friday, August 18th. We have another preseason NFL slate today to go over. We've got two games kicking off at 7 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight. Let's be honest, the top plays are kind of gross. I am joined, as always, for some NFL takes with Occupy Fantasy CEO and co-founder Brian Jester. Brian, I know you've been under the weather for the last few days, but we are happy to see you back on the mend and able to at least talk us through some of the things you're thinking about on today's two-game slate.
What's up, Chris? It absolutely killed me not to be able to talk about last night's Browns and Eagles game on YouTube, but picked a very good slate to come back to today, so happy to chop it up with you and answer any questions people have.
So right here on the screen, I have what I think is going to be, even though it's a pass catcher, probably one of the most popular plays on the slate, Brian. Andrei Josevich had 10 targets last week for the Bengals in their first preseason game. I would say he's my favorite play on the slate, but I think we can get back to the pass catchers in a couple of minutes. I think our agenda today that we want to go through is talking through top plays at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and then we'll spend a little bit of time on tight end because there's really nothing that stands out there, but we got to fill the spot. So we'll give you all some tips and tricks for tight end tonight as well. Brian, at the quarterback position, I have Trevor Siemian preloaded into the template on the screen here because I do think he's probably the best play for all contest types tonight. He's going to be starting for the Cincinnati Bengals in their game here against the Falcons, has some prior starting quarterback experience in regular season games in the NFL. So for me, that's why I give him the leg up over Jake Browning, who is Cincinnati's other quarterback that is going to play the second half tonight. So as far as low risk especially is concerned tonight, we do think the Bengals quarterback situation is the safest of the four teams that are on the board tonight. But I don't know if you have any other quarterbacks you're looking at for high risk that might be worth considering here.
Yeah, it's really an ugly slate, and as we saw last night in the showdown slate, that getting a half of work doesn't necessarily guarantee you many fantasy points. Looking at you, Marcus Mariota. So we have the confirmation for Cincinnati's quarterbacks. Their opponent, Atlanta, we're expecting Woodside to get a half again, but Arthur Smith is playing super coy because obviously it's important not to share your plans in the preseason. So it sounds like the starters will play a little bit. Heineke might play some if we look at their previous trends in last year's preseason games. And then if you look at the first game, the 7 o'clock game, the Giants and the Panthers, there's reports that Bryce Young is definitely going to play for Carolina. Beat reporters seem to think that Daniel Jones is going to play for the Giants. So we can't really guarantee more than a half for any other quarterback on the slate, like Tommy DeVito, like Matt Corral, like we saw last week. However, they'll probably play a half, but Chris, we're just flipping coins as to who's going to outscore each other when everyone's playing roughly the same amount of time.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, Brian, this is what we kind of circled back to in our staff chat, not just you and I, but Brandon, Lucas, who does a lot of our game day research. We want to lock in the 6 to 10 points maybe we'll get from Siemian or Browning here from the Bengals playing a full half of football, kind of similar to Cleveland last night with Kellen Mond and Dorian Thompson-Robinson giving you that 8-9 points. You just kind of take that, and we look to get different elsewhere. The quarterback is probably not going to be the place that we win the tournament this evening. So I think it makes sense to just focus on this Bengals quarterback room tonight. And me personally, Trevor Siemian is where I will be probably going here more so than Browning. That's just me, though. Running back has quite a few options as well. And I think I am going to stay right here with the Bengals, Brian, because it does feel like this Chase Brown versus Chris Evans decision at running back is probably the one that's going to be the most important to get right. Just given projected ownership, it looks like Chase Brown is going to be the most popular of the two here, but reading through the notes that we've put together, it sounds like you feel like there's at least a non-zero chance Evans could play more than Chase Brown here, right?
Absolutely. And that's part of the big differentiator for us here at Occupy is us being able to decipher these playing time trends historically. It's a big reason why we were able to call out Mariota playing a half last night when everyone else in the industry just assumed that Tanner McKee would be playing a half or more. As you said, and when you've been on these videos over the past week or so, Chris, coaches are creatures of habit. They really like to go back to these plans that they've done preseason through preseason. And the Bengals, their top 2 running backs in terms of snaps played in preseason week 1, typically play the most snaps the following week. However, that order has flip-flopped a couple of times since the Cincinnati coaching staff has been in place. So both Evans and Chase Brown are battling for this number 2 spot, this pass catching spot behind Joe Mixon. It wouldn't shock us to see Evans over Chase Brown, and I'm pretty sure Brown will probably be the most popular running back on the slate. Do you feel otherwise?
No, I think you're 100% correct. Some of the other data points that we look at, projections around the industry, other articles from very, very good NFL DFS analysts predicting the slate and who to play. Chase Brown is at the top of the list at running back for pretty much everyone tonight. Not only that, we have the underdog higher lower stat lines that are available for people to put some pickup entries together. Chase Brown right now looks like he has the highest yardage stat line over there. So that's just another data point that tells us Chase Brown is probably going to be the most popular running back on the 2-game slate tonight, and probably in that showdown slate between the Bengals and the Falcons. It's available as well. Speaking of the Falcons, I think we also like the running back room on the other side of this game. Just pulled up the Falcons here on the screen, Brian, and like we do in all of our preview videos, when we like a play, this looks daunting. This looks like there's a ton of running backs that are eligible to play from the Falcons tonight, but that's not actually the case, right? We may have cameos from Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier to some degree. We know that Cordero Patterson is out tonight. We see Avery Williams on the injured reserve. And then some of these guys down here at the bottom, we've got some fullbacks mixed in with the running backs. It seems like it's just going to be Washington and Godwin Igwebuike here that are going to get the majority of the run for the Falcons. And I do think here, Brian, of the two, Washington is probably going to be the most popular, but I also think he's the better play here as well. So I think Washington is the one that I would select out of the Falcons backfield tonight personally.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's not super clear to me which one we prefer between Washington and Igwebuike, but Washington 61% of the snaps last week, Igwebuike 39%. Just 5 running backs on the roster. I know DraftKings has like 37 listed there, but most are fullbacks. There's a guy, Baylor, who I truly don't know who he is. He's not on anybody's roster. But the snap breakdown last week was because just Washington and Igwebuike played.
Right.
Bijan, Tyler Algier, Cordell Patterson didn't play. Patterson is confirmed not going to play in the preseason. I think the biggest wild card here is Tyler Algier. I wouldn't expect them to play him a ton just based on his performance last year, and they know what he can do. But it also wouldn't shock me, Chris, if Bijan comes out and plays a series or two and they play Algier through the end of the half, and then Washington and Igwebuike, they split the second half. So I think Algier maybe a sneaky play on a slate where there's not a ton outside the Cincinnati running backs for sure. So we're going to say this about a lot of positions, that there could be some guys here that play a quarter and end up in the optimal lineup or the winning lineup, just because there's really not that many slam dunk plays.
I think just right here live on the show, we'll have the daily plug up on the website by about 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here at the absolute latest. Brian, I think you've talked me into making sure we have Tyler Algier in our high-risk running back plays on this slate. I do think Algier is probably closer to that group of starters than not, but 100% agree with your analysis. Some of the beat writers for the Falcons, cover the Falcons for The Athletic, for example, have been putting out their, like all teams right now, 53-man roster projections. Touch projections for the Falcons came out. I thought that was an interesting article that I haven't seen many beat reporters covering other teams do. They actually think Algier is in line for just shy of 200 total touches as the RB2 behind Bijan. So that's probably the same, if not more touches than a lot of RB1s on some teams are going to get this season. So I would be really, really skeptical of Algier having a ton of work here, maybe a quarter, but that could be enough on this slate where there just are not a lot of good plays. I guess we got another game with running backs to go through here. We feel pretty confident, Brian, that with these 4 running backs for the Panthers, Miles Sanders is not going to play tonight. It's probably about a quarter each for these guys, so very high risk here with the Panthers backfield. I'm not personally considering any of these as good plays for a low-risk lineup, or maybe like a one-entry high-risk lineup, which is typically how I play. But on the Giants side, a lot of the content that came out from their beat writers, like Dan Duggan, for example, from The Athletic, who is very, very good, covers the Giants over there. Seems like we're going to see a lot of touches for Eric Gray and Jashawn Corbin. I think Gray here is going to be the popular play tonight, Brian, but Corbin right now, we have him as our top high risk running back on this slate. I feel pretty good about our listing there.
Okay, I wanna hear more about that. I'll touch on the Panthers running back situation really
Okay.
quickly because I think we differ
Okay.
very
Interesting.
heavily from the industry on how ownership and playing time projections are playing out, and then I'll kick it back to you, and you can discuss the
Yeah,
Giants
absolutely.
running back situation. So if you look at last week for the Panthers, Spencer Brown 42% of the snaps, Raheem Blackshear 35%, Chuba Hubbard 23%, and Chuba played basically exclusively with the starters. Bryce Young also played 23%. Miles Sanders didn't play last week. Cameron Peoples, their running back 5, he didn't play last week. Jake Luton, their fourth string quarterback, he also didn't play. But there are reports that based on practice reps this week that they expect Luton to get into the game. So we're expecting, and you may be wondering if you're new to preseason DFS, why are we talking about the quarterback situations when we're projecting running back playing time? Is because these running backs play with their quarterbacks in their team units. So if we expect Bryce Young to play the first quarter, Matt Corral to play the second quarter and third quarter, and Luton to get into the game in the fourth unit to play that fourth quarter, there's a decent chance that Cameron Peoples gets in the game in the fourth quarter. That shortens everyone's playing time. Plus, historically, the Panthers haven't really given, uh, and I want to say the Panthers, I mean Frank Reich's coaching staff, who's now coaching the Panthers. Whoever leads the team in snaps at running back in week 1 doesn't necessarily lead them again in week 2. It's a huge mess for me. I know Underdog opened Spencer Brown 35, 37 rushing yards. That's gone down. I think people maybe are starting to pick up on it a little bit. But I think this whole situation is a lot more high risk than the industry is giving it credit for, Chris.
I think that's going to be important to get right. And if we are different enough there and also correct, that might be enough for us to land on some of those lower owned plays that can help us get to the top of the leaderboard this week, Brian. With the Giants, because I know you told me to elaborate on the Jashawn Corbin Eric Gray situation there. Looking back to last season a little different for the Giants because Daniel Jones did play in preseason week 1 and in preseason week 2 last year. We're not expecting, or excuse me, last week we didn't see Daniel Jones, but tonight we are expecting to see Daniel Jones. Last year in week 2, the Giants starting running backs still didn't play, even though Daniel Jones was out there. That was Saquon and Matt Breida as the high-end backup. And we saw 3 running backs only play in that game. Corbin was still on the team at that point. Another deep end of the roster running back, Antonio Williams. He and Corbin played the vast majority of the game. And then the last running back on the depth chart, Sandro Platzkummer, cleaned up super late in that game. So I think it's pretty possible tonight that we get Gray and Corbin. I should mention that Corbin Williams last year also played the most snaps in the week 1 game. So we had a little bit of consistency in week 1 to week 2 last year. I think that means we see a little bit of that here with Gray and Corbin. And then just some of the top kind of players to watch articles that we found that we've got linked in the plug that'll be out later. A lot of guys talking about Corbin getting touches in this backfield. I feel like he is probably on the wrong side of the cut line for them right now, whereas Eric Gray was just drafted. They're probably either going to keep on the active roster or stash him on the practice squad. It feels like Corbin has more of a reason to play more and then try to demonstrate that he belongs not just on the Giants roster, but on a roster somewhere in the NFL. So that's why I think Corbin is a better high risk play tonight.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree for sure. I think there's a very real chance that Saquon doesn't play. Breida, he did play last week with the quote unquote starters and Tyrod Taylor. I'm wondering if he doesn't play this week. Uh, they also have Gary Brightwell, who is out. James Robinson's on the roster, but I mean, he's a veteran. How much run are they truly going to get? But we'll lean into the trends here and say that that the top 2 guys last week, Gray and Corbin, do get the most run again this week. So I'm with you there, Chris. All in all, I think just to summarize, the Cincinnati running back situation probably looks the safest. And then we're flipping a lot of coins elsewhere. So,
Yeah. So if I were to, like I like to do on the screen here when we're talking through top plays, summarize what we've gone through, I think Simeon or Browning at quarterback. I prefer Simeon at running back this evening. We're definitely more confident in the Atlanta and Cincinnati side. I will use Chase Brown and Washington here as the safest running backs to consider. And then for a high risk play, some differentiation tonight. I do think this is a slate where flexing the running back makes a ton of sense in all contest types, Brian.
Agree.
I will use my favorite play, Deshaun Corbin, as the third running back that I think is worth rostering tonight. And now we have what I think is an interesting situation tonight at wide receiver, because once again, going back to the Bengals, the field is going to be all over this top three wide receiver group as far as playing time is concerned, I think, tonight. It will be Josevich here, had 10 targets last week, looked pretty good. We have Charlie Jones, rookie draft pick this past spring, that obviously they want to see what he can do here a little bit as well. And then Kwame Lassiter also played a lot, specifically ran a ton of routes out of the slot. Just a disgusting 18 air yards on 7 targets last week, like a true just drag route wide receiver here for the Bengals and Kwame Lassiter. But these three guys are probably going to be near the top of everybody's top plays projections for preseason DFS tonight. Do you have a lean here with these Bengals receivers, or not really?
No, I think they're all great plays. I think remind me of the pronunciation one more time. I got Dayquil flowing through the system. How do you?
Josevich, I believe, is the way to pronounce this man's name. Yes.
Josevich. Yeah, I mean, you look at the targets last week, he's going to be extremely popular, probably the top play on everybody's list. I think this is kind of similar to Sunday slate, where we have a couple of receivers from the same team. And I truly don't think it's a bad idea, Chris, to play 2 or even 3 in the same lineup. You would never do that in the regular season. But by playing Josevich, Charlie Jones, Kwame Lassiter, you're basically guaranteeing like 15, 20 points, ideally, unless they get shut out. And then you don't miss out on the one that goes off. And it may seem weird and counterintuitive, but on a 2-game slate, it's certainly a viable option. So that's one thing I'm thinking about. The other thing here is, Chris, we have 2 reserve receivers behind them. And yes, historically, Cincinnati receivers that have led in week 1 have led in week 2. But these guys behind them should play a little bit as well in the second half. And that's Shedrick Jackson, and that's Mac Hippenhammer, totally real names, not made up, that had 4 targets each last week. So, we're looking at Lassiter 7 targets. We're looking at Yosevich 10 targets. We're looking at Jones 6 targets. When you're playing with backup quarterbacks, the difference between 4 targets and 6 targets isn't that much. Mm-hmm. We've seen guys outscore other guys on less targets in regular season, but also in preseason. So I think Hippenhammer and Shedrick Jones are the easy pivots away if you're playing the larger contest.
100% agree with you. They'll be on our high risk plays tonight, and this is where I think we differentiate and find the place that we can have more success than our opponents tonight, is with some of these receivers that aren't going to be owned as heavily and are we playing in the second half of the game. Hopefully they have a little more success, find the end zone, and make the difference in our lineups. Brian, Hippenhammer, my favorite out of this second group for the Bengals, but just in general, Bengals seem to have a much shallower position group tonight at receiver, which is why these guys are all great plays. Another team that is in that situation tonight, although it is a little bit more crowded, I do think the Panthers wide receivers seem to be a little thinner as well, Brian. And some of the top plays as far as high ownership is going to be concerned on this slate. Javon Wims, everyone's going to look at the box score last week, the usage, the routes run, how heavily he was targeted per route. And he's probably going to be a pretty popular receiver this evening. And Shee Smith out of the slot as well, also had a lot of work last week. Those 2 are definitely the popular guys you'll see in some low-risk lineups tonight, but I think there's some opportunity in high risk with some guys behind these 2 on the Panthers tonight.
Yeah, if you guys are looking for a super low-owned play, we'll give you one here, and I'll let Chris expand on a little bit. But yeah, if you look at last week, Javon Wims, 65% of the snaps played, Smith, 56%. Derek Wright played 42%. He drew 3 targets. However, he hurt his knee. He's injured. He won't play this week. Demir Bird is also out. Terrace Marshall Jr. is also out. So lots of injuries in the Panthers receiving core. So with 42% of the snaps left to be played by someone else, there's a very decent chance that someone from the 3rd or 4th team steps up in Wright's place. Chris, it wouldn't be a preseason DFS slate. It wouldn't be a low-owned call if they didn't formally play in a spring league. So I'll throw you the alley-oop if you want to throw it down on which receiver you think may take those snaps, and no one's going to play him tonight.
No one's going to play this guy. Really quickly, this unit that should play more, we're expecting Jake Luton to get some playing time behind Matt Corral, which suggests there'd be more playing time for this 3rd unit group, but the receiver I'm eyeing should also play with that 2nd unit because of the injuries to Wright and Marshall, and that's Gary Jennings Jr., formerly of should say NFL draft pick by the Seattle Seahawks. Give him his props. He was drafted. But Gary Jennings Jr. here, formerly of the St. Louis Battlehawks from the XFL. Jennings was buried on the depth chart a little bit for the Battlehawks this past season. But just in general, Brian, I love these spring football guys in preseason because these guys are already conditioned. They've been playing competitive pro football for a significant amount of weeks and months compared to their peers here who are just gearing up for an NFL season. So Jennings, kind of a spring football veteran, preseason veteran at this point, a little bit more of a dynamic receiver that can run on the outside and in the slot. That's how the Battlehawks used him this past season, but he's specifically stepping into a role tonight, we think, where he's going to be taking over one of those boundary outside field stretcher wide receiver spots in lieu of Derek Wright. So Jennings, 4.42 240 at the NFL Combine. This is a fast wide receiver, backup level wide receiver. That's why he's playing in preseason, but definitely has a tremendous amount of upside here. This would be similar to, I'd say, like the Devin Allen play that we gave out last night in Discord, a guy that should play quite a bit tonight, but isn't necessarily being discussed in the fantasy community.
For sure. And I mean, we saw it with Austin Watkins twice, right? Like, not saying that he's going to be an Austin Watkins type of play, but clearly playing at a different level than most of the guys, and very clearly looks like he belongs because he has been playing football as recently as 3-4 months ago in competitive environments. So, really like the Gary Jennings call there, Chris. And again, I don't think anyone's really going to play him. So.
And I don't think we've got two more teams as far as wide receivers are concerned. I think I can knock the Falcons out of the way here first, Brian. This is a very, very deep room, and we don't have a good read on the trends here. One of our notes, in fact, suggests the guys who played the least at wide receiver last week, they seemed in previous years for Arthur Smith to be the guys that actually played the most the following week. So if we were going to throw some darts with Falcons wide receivers, I guess it would be Frank Darby or Darby's on IR, so maybe not Darby here. Darby is going to be removed from the play. He's not going to play. But maybe
Scotty
who's
Miller,
the other player that was low on? Scotty Miller, yeah, formerly of the Bucks, might be an option here. There is another spring legend here on the Falcons. Matthew Sexton was on the Vegas Vipers, the XFL, this past spring, the worst team in the XFL. It's probably I've never heard of him. So, but Sexton would be someone I would look at. But honestly, Brian, I'm not playing any Falcons pass catchers tonight. I'm at wide receiver anyway. I'm focused more on the Giants here as the final group. And my favorite play here is David Sills. Just looking over the usage from last week, Sills has been on the team for a couple of years. He was targeted pretty heavily when he was in the game last week by the Giants quarterbacks. And if DeVito is going to be playing a half or more again, it could be the David Sills show once again. And I think this is a perfect high-risk wide receiver play because I don't think the ownership is going to be there.
Yeah, agree. And I think, and again, this is live, and if you're watching this recorded, we did this at 1 p.m. Eastern. So, as if you've played any preseason slates in the past, you know that things can change pretty quickly. So there may be some things that we've said here that we can completely 180 on based on who's available and who's out by the time 7 p.m. rolls around. So it's possible that maybe some guys sit or we get some news for Atlanta. But I think even if you played 150 lineups, that there's some reason to think that you could probably win a GPP without playing a single Falcons receiver in any lineup, just based on how that could be divvied up, on how their playing time could be divvied up. As far as the Giants go, yeah, I mean, David Sills, productive in college, productive in preseason, has even been productive in limited snaps in the regular season. So, yeah, those are the guys that we definitely like to play.
The field is probably going to be a little higher on Bryce Ford Wheaton. He played the most snaps at wide receiver last week for the Giants. Obviously, the Giants starters getting a little bit of run at the beginning of the game tonight is going to eat into that and maybe makes the likes of like Paris Campbell and Darius Slayton and Jalen Hyatt there probably high risk dart throws, but I still think the guys in the second and third units here probably better options to consider. All right. We do have to at least a little bit, Brian, discuss the tight end position. I don't want to do it because we don't really have a play that we love here, but you're building some lineups to play tonight. Maybe talk the people through your mentality as far as filling the tight end slot on this slate.
I think there are two routes you could go tonight. And, I mean, these pass catchers are horrific at the tight end position. I think I want to hear your thoughts, Chris. I think if you're playing a bunch of lineups, you're playing 3 lineups, both of these strategies apply. I think you could play one guy in every single lineup and probably be okay. My 10K win on Sunday had a tight end that scored 1.5 points on a 2-game slate. We've seen GPP winners score literally 0 from the tight end position. But there are also some guys here that are going to be 1% owned despite playing as much as some of the other tight ends on the slate. And if they somehow catch 3 passes and score a touchdown, that's a major edge. So I think I would say either pick one tight end and play them in every single lineup, because even if they score 0, it won't hurt you that much. Or you play all these guys evenly and hope that one of them scores 8-10 points, and your lineups that have him are at a big advantage. So I don't have a preference either way. I'll probably spread it out, I think. But to me, if you said I want to play Darren Waller, who might play a couple series tonight in every single lineup, I'm not going to argue against that at all.
I think there's an argument either way that you can make, because we are expecting 0 to maybe 2 or 3 points out of all these guys. So whether you're locking one or diversifying and playing, a handful, like there's 7 or 8 different tight ends we think are usable. If you sprinkled those guys into your portfolio only tonight, I don't see any downside risk there. I think I would probably lean towards just playing Darren Waller and hoping that he has a really productive drive with Daniel Jones, drive or 2, because I don't think if he gets like 2 or 3 catches in one series, Brian, maybe he falls in the end zone, no one's going to have more upside than Darren Waller tonight. Because some of these other guys, I'll just give you a preview. I mean, we like a couple of Falcons tight ends that played a lot last week, but they're guys like Tucker Fisk, Parker Hess, who's been in the NFL before. Like these are not the most exciting fantasy options at tight end. So someone like Darren Waller, even though it's preseason, not going to be playing a ton, we know that he has that pass catcher pedigree, could be one of the better plays on this slate, even if he's only playing a handful of snaps.
I mean, and if you read any preseason reports from beat reporters, you can just assume that when Waller's on the field, Jones is targeting them, because every practice report has been that Waller's uncoverable and Jones has been peppering him with targets. So I assume that would carry over. And even if he does play a series, if he gets 2 targets, like you said, we can't even guarantee that any of these other assholes are going to get 2 targets either. So why not play the actual good player? So I'm totally on board with that.
Yeah. So that's, been here about a half an hour talking about this slate. Definitely appreciate you making yourself available this afternoon, Brian. We do have a couple of comments in the chat. I don't really see any specific questions, so just thank you to all of you guys for watching the stream with us this afternoon. We got a really big slate coming up tomorrow, Brian. I believe we're anticipating it'll be an 8-game slate, locking around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Not sure specifically what our plan is just yet for video versus live show, but we will definitely announce that in the Discord when we have put that together for you. We're still focused on getting the plug document together tonight. That'll be up by about 5 p.m. Eastern. If not sooner, we're pretty close to done with it at this point, folks. Yep. So once again, appreciate you all watching. Please like and subscribe. You'll know when we schedule our next video or upload our next video for you talking preseason. And if you have any comments or questions about this slate, you can actually treat this kind of like a pre-recorded video that we post on some slates. Leave a comment in the video below if you're watching this after the stream ended. We will definitely be able to answer those questions as well. And we'll give you a link to the plug as soon as it is posted. If you're not yet a member of Occupy, it's been on the screen the entire time we've been streaming. You can join for as little as $7 a week. Get some access to the preseason content the rest of this week and into next week. I think I took care of most of the business you wanted to cover, Brian, but if you have anything you want to share before we end the show today, please take it away.
Save my voice, bro. You covered it all. Thank you for that.
Lauren asking for a defense pick. I don't think we have a strong lean with any direction on defense, Lauren. That's why we didn't really cover it here. But just in general, we know the field is going to be on the Bengals quarterbacks and a lot of these Bengals plays. So I think that does make the Atlanta Falcons one of the better defenses in high-risk contests, because I think most people are going to treat this like a regular season mentality where they're playing these Bengals players on offense. They don't want to play the Falcons defense, but it's preseason. These two units can be optimal together. So I think that right there can give you a little bit of a unique combination. I don't mind the Falcons, even with all these Bengals players that were on tonight. So Hope that answers your question on defenses. We'll have some rankings in the plug when that gets posted as well. For Brian, I'm Chris. Thank you all for watching, and we will talk to you tomorrow for more NFL preseason.